me? Do
Yeah,
you listen me
sounds
okay?
good.
Greatly. Let me introduce now Lee R.Lambert is a PMI Fellow and founder of PMI. He's a person who has shaped in a very good extent what we all know today as the project management field. So for me, it's a real honor. And when we were at the a couple of days ago, we were like talking about how to share his biography in a synthetic way. He asked me to do a very hard work, probably impossible. I just picked a couple of very interesting highlights, but probably it's like, okay, there's more to a lot of more to know about his personality, but let me highlight a couple of them. He's, as I said, a PMI founder and a fellow member. He belongs to a select group of 70 people who are fellows from PMI. He has made an impressive career from mid-60s in the field, of course, of project management as a senior PM in different responsibilities for development and implementation of groundbreaking, sophisticated enterprise project management processes for engineering, medical diagnostics, and R&D. In 1981, he was invited to co-create the PMP as we know it today, the PMP certification. And he also has like a story about the name, I guess, because some people wanted it to be called PPM, and some of the other people who were shaping the certification wanted it to be named PMP. Probably Lee can tell us a little bit more about that story. He is also an award-winning personality. He's been distinguished with PMI Distinguished Contribution Award. He has also been distinguished with Professional Development Provider of the Year 2007. He's also an author of books and professional papers in the field. I guess he's distinguished as the father of today's approach for PM project management education and instruction. With all that said, which is a very slice of his short introduction, I give the floor to Lee. Thank you very much, Lee. Please, when you want.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction. It's always amazes me when I listen to speakers. It kind of gets me that you have such a long presentation of credentials when in fact, really you ought to just ask people when the presentation's over, how do you do? Because it's kind of like we're building that up. And I think you did a good job. A couple of little things I want to correct. I wasn't a founder of PMI. I was the founder of the PMP. PMI began in 1969. I didn't actually become a member until 1978. So, but that's still a long time. Still been with them a long time. The only other thing I want to say is I worked just like probably most of you are working on a job, getting paid and coming in, day out, until 1984. And then I literally had been so successful by the time I was 37 years old that I convinced myself I didn't have to work anymore. And my goal in life was to tell everybody else how to work. And it's working pretty well, really. I've taught about 50,000 project management professionals in 23 different countries. And now with this webinar series, wow, I'm getting all over the world. I mean, I've been places I never even heard of before. So it's a real opportunity for me to share my knowledge. I'm sort of a unique kind of guy. My reputation is one of what they call a pragmatic evangelist. I had a choice to make in my young life. I could either be a priest or a project manager. So, fortunately I chose project management because I am evangelic about that. I believe in it. I think it's really the profession that if anyone really gave it a chance, they'd see how rewarding it can be. So this topic that we're going to talk about tonight, happens to be hot topic. I've been following LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I got 25,000 connections on LinkedIn, so I'm working on that stuff all the time. And so I'm looking and seeing what everybody's posting. And what's getting posted more than anything else I see is some discussion about this concept called the project economy. Now, the project economy has been embraced by Sunil Prashar, who's our new CEO and who's taken PMI to just some wonderful places. But one of the things he's done is he's tried to point out this idea of the project economy. Now, I'll put it in simplistic terms for you to understand, and that is, and this is where he shares my opinion. Basically, when I look inside of the idea of the project economy, what I see is everything is a project and everybody is a project manager. So I really, that to me, that's really the answer now, because it links everything together. People working on projects sometimes don't know why they're working on those projects. They don't know where they fit. They don't know how they support the organization. So this idea of this strategic design, where I'm defining what projects I'm going to do and then going forward and actually doing them, is what we're trying to accomplish in this idea of strategic linkage. I'm gonna set you up with an example that sort of tied it all together for me before I get into the real nuts and bolts of the presentation. In 1993, I was working with IBM. And IBM was going through one of the few real difficult times they've ever experienced. They were projecting an $8 billion loss that year. And so they brought in a new CEO. They got rid of a guy named John Akers, brought in a guy named Lou Gerstner, and Gerstner stepped in and evaluated the organization, and he came to some interesting conclusions. He said, first of all, we're doing too darn many projects. He said, we're spread so thin, we can't focus on doing anything really well. We're doing lots of stuff okay. He said, so that's going to change. We're going to have to get rid of a lot of projects so we can focus on what's going to return the most value to the organization. Okay, that was number one. Number two, he said, we will be using project management as the thread that links this organization together. In other words, everything we do is going to have some project content, and we're going to link that back to the organizational objectives by integrating the two potential areas: strategic design, project delivery. So that was his pronouncement. And he when he started to do that, everybody was sort of resisting that. IBM, that's not the way we do it at IBM, was sort of the attitude. And he said to his senior level executive, he says, well, listen, I'll tell you what, this is where this train's going, and you can either hop on and join the ride, or you can get off and go somewhere else. And 7 of his senior level executives quit that day. So he made it clear he was committed to this idea of strategic linkage. He basically said, every project we do must be somehow connected to the objectives we're attempting to achieve as a corporation. So that's sort of the background. And by the way, we worked with him for about 3 years. I probably trained maybe 1,000 people in IBM, and they created an organization called the Center of Project Management Excellence, and it's still the benchmark today. And so after about 3 years, he had turned that company around, made huge advances. He did things like, and some people don't realize this, but if you remember back in those days, the computer of choice was the IBM laptop. Okay, ThinkPad, they call it, the IBM ThinkPad. That was the computer of choice. Well, one of the things that he decided was that really wasn't in the long-term strategy for the IBM organization, and he sold the ThinkPad to guess who? China. And it's now known as Lenovo. So when you buy a Lenovo computer, you're buying an old IBM ThinkPad. So those are the kinds of decisions he was willing to make to maintain the strategic linkage. So let's look at this in the idea of the environment that we're in. Go ahead and change that slide, Mateus. We're in a situation here where we have to realize the world that we're in. the world is so fast paced. I mean, even before this pandemic, it was crazy. It was chaotic. There's so many things going on, so many objectives that we wanted to accomplish, and we had the predictive people doing the way they've been doing it for years, doing the way I started. I started in 1967 doing predictive project management. Well, that's been around for a long time, but that got to change, and waterfalls there for the older folk, IT folk, that's the way they grew up. And now we've got agile. So we've got these three approaches that we have to consider if they add value to the project we're trying to get accomplished in support of the strategic objectives of the organization. And so we have choices to make. We have to understand no matter which choice we make, predictive, waterfall, or hybrid, agile, they're all going towards the same objectives. They all need to get the same things done to support the organizational environment. Okay, next slide. But here's where the problem is. The problem is people who are at the working level, maybe not project managers per se, maybe individual contributors who also need to be linked, by the way. They don't really understand what the strategy is. So let me lay this out for you. If you decide as an organization, you've got this group of people, CIO, CFO, COO, all the C-level people. And they know what they want to get accomplished in the coming year. And so they go away to flesh that out. They go away to talk about what should the corporate objectives be? What strategic objectives do we need to accomplish to be sure that we're moving in the right direction as far as the organization is concerned? So they get together and they sort of hash it out. They sort of argue it out until there's some selected group of projects that will be used to meet those objectives. So when they get their list of strategic objectives, what those strategic objectives spawn are projects. And so for any one particular strategic objective, there could be 3 or 4 or 5 projects that need to be done to effectively get that project completed. Another example, I worked for a company that was in the medical diagnostics field, and they had been hammered in the marketplace, and so they brought me in to create a new product in 18 months. Usually took three years, but they wanted me to do it in 18 months. So I came in and I looked at it and I said, well, what is your objective? And they said, our strategic objective is to produce a product that's better than the competition, cheaper than the competition, and more accurate. Now, the reason accurate is important is this a blood glucose monitoring system for in-home use for diabetics. I'm diabetic. I use the same piece of equipment that I designed, so I got free ones for life. And so that was the objective. Okay. Well, when I look at that and when I think about that objective, what I have to understand is it's going to take a lot of things to come together to be able to complete that objective based on the projects that I complete. So we broke it down into, we've got a meter. The electronic meter was a project. The chemistry strip to carry the blood interaction was a project. The carrying cases and accessories were a project. And pretty soon we looked down, we had 5 different projects going on, all focused on meeting the objectives that was identified in the strategic sessions that the people had. And that's the way it works. You don't just get a one-for-one relationship. You don't have a strategy and a project, There's always going to be multiple projects. Now, PMI, we sort of endorse the idea of program. So we have a credential for a program management professional that's dealing with multiple projects within an organization. Now, from the standpoint of what's the difference between project management and program management, my view is that program management is project management on steroids. It's the same concept. We just have multiple projects, and that's where it starts to get important to understand exactly what the strategy is. Because if you get overwhelmed by it, when you start to look at it and it looks too big to get your hands around, sometimes you just want to duck out. Sometimes you just want to stick your head. Go ahead and focus on the next slide. You just want to go ahead and stick your head in the sand and hope it all goes away. Hope at the end of the day, when you look around, everything has taken place, everything's done, everything's gone, and everybody has done what they needed to do. But you can't do that. You've got to be on top of it from that standpoint. You've got to be willing to understand. Yeah, the next one, Matthias. You've got to be willing to understand it's your job to understand where your project fits in this strategy. Now, the reason it's important, okay, this is a huge issue. This is one of the reasons my career moved so quickly, is that I focused on understanding where my projects fit, what senior level executive was the champion of my projects, and then I made sure that I got them done in order to make that individual look good. So I wanted to know from the beginning, here's where we fall apart. And when we get our charter document, the PMI charter document out of the PMBOK, it's got a sort of a cursory description of scope. It's got a few other pieces of information, and then it's signed off, and that becomes your official go information for your project. So now you know you've got a project that's authorized. But the piece that's missing on any of the charter documents, I've not seen one with this on it, and I've pushed for it for years, is that every charter document needs to identify very specifically what strategic objective does this project support? What strategic objective does this project support? Now, let me give you some insight into what that does for you. First of all, it's interesting information, but in the scope of things, what it really does for you is it lets you understand where you fit. How important is the work that you're doing? One of the tools that we use to motivate and inspire people is for them to understand what a major contribution they're making to the success of the organization. So I want to know. So whenever I talk to my project people, I say, do you know which strategic objective that your project supports? And 75% of the time they say, no, we got our charter and we're off and running with this thing. Well, ask questions. This is what I found really successful project managers do, is they ask a lot of questions. And it's kind of interesting because oftentimes people think that's a sign of weakness to ask questions. Don't ask questions. They'll think you don't understand what. Ask questions. I used to tell people, ask questions till somebody asks you to stop asking questions. Now you know you're onto something. So you want to have that information. You want to know, where do I fit? Because you're going to see in a minute why that's critical information. Because here's what we deal with. Next slide, please. Here's what we deal with. We have to recognize that when we're dealing in an organization that has multiple strategic objectives, that we are also going to have then senior level management who have multiple level of ownership. And so when they start to define what projects they're going to do for the coming year, there's a real battle that takes place here. There's a real heavy-duty discussion that goes on about which projects are the highest priority, which strategic objective is the most important. And this battle goes on for quite some time before somebody finally makes a decision. Well, the problem is, here's the decision. This slide tells you what the decision is. Everything's priority one. Everything is priority one. Well, here's the problem. In today's environment of project management, now back when I was in the General Electric company, when I got a project assigned to me, I also got a team of people assigned. So I had a dedicated team of people to deliver that project. That's the way we used to do it. Well, forget about that. We found out that's not very profitable to have people sitting around waiting for a project to come. So we shifted to the matrix. And so now we've got these silos of people with different skill sets, engineering, chemistry, quality, whatever those skill sets are. And those are managed by resource pool managers, okay? Well, from a project management perspective, these people have my success in their hand. I can't be successful unless I can get the resources I need to do the job I've been asked to do, okay? All right, so follow the logic. So you're going to be fighting with other people in the system. You're going to be vying for resources that somebody else needs as well as you do. Well, the only way you can win that discussion is by convincing the people at the decision-making level that your project is more important than Bob's project. And the reason it's more important is it consistently supports the strategic objective that's most meaningful for the organization. So that's why you need to know where you fit. Because what we're trying to do, if you see this slide with the chain link, this is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to establish a linkage between all the things going on in a project. This is why Lou Gerstner told the IBM people, project management will be the thread that ties this organization together. Well, I want to talk about it more like a chain link that's linked together. So we want to get to that. So we now have vertical hierarchy integration. So we have lots of work breakdown structures that we'll talk about. That's the vertical hierarchy of the work definition so that we can assign the resources to that work. But in addition to that, I need to get horizontal integration so that when there's an overflow of people, I can be sure they're appropriately assigned. You've got to remember that resource pool owners don't have the same objectives that project management people do. The reason I say that is because the resource pool owners their performance is evaluated based on how efficiently they utilize all the people in their pool. So in other words, if I'm using a histogram approach, if I'm a resource pool manager, I want a flat histogram. That tells me all of my people are applied, are billable all the time. That's what I want, okay? Well, a project manager, that's not what a project manager wants. A project manager wants to know he or she can get resources allocated to his project when they're needed. And when they're not needed, they can go back to the resource pool. So you see, there's a varying reason for doing the way we do things. So we have to have vertical with the WBS. We have to have horizontal with the resource pools. And then from that, then we can draw conclusions about what decisions should be made to assure that we are delivering the right project at the right time. And if anybody ever told you project management's easy, they haven't done it. It's not easy at all. If it was easy, they wouldn't call it work. This is something we really have to pay some attention to in how we go about doing that. Next slide, please. So in order to do that, I've got to do, in fact, I demand that when I was in the working world and I had people working for me, I demanded this. One of the very first things we did is I will demand that a project manager conduct a stakeholder analysis. Some of you may remember that only, not the 6th edition, but back at the 5th edition of the PMBOK, we added stakeholder management as an independent standalone component of the PMBOK. That's how important we felt it was. And I continue to feel it is. I make a statement oftentimes that systems don't get projects done, people get projects done. So if that's the case, then I want to make sure I'm linked with all the people. So I always demand a stakeholder study. So first thing I do, and I have 3 categories of stakeholders, okay? And every project has these. The first one is called control stakeholders. These are the stakeholders that have the ability to stop or start your project. Some of them will be signatory on the charter, some of them will not. For example, if the champion is a VP of IT, he or she may be signatory, but there's another person called legal that's not on the charter, but still has the ability to stop or start your project. So I want to identify who they are. Now remember, when I do a stakeholder study, I'm identifying who the stakeholders are, what their stakes are in the project, and then how do I most effectively communicate with them. Okay, so that's the idea. So I got the control stakeholders, top level. There's not too many in number. Then I drop down to the second level. The second level is made up of what we call influence or impact stakeholders. And these stakeholders are individual contributors, everybody that's assigned to the project manager, anybody that can have an influence on or an impact on the outcome of the project falls into this category. So, and that's a big group, okay? But you got to remember, it's not just the people working on the project. For example, simplistic example, if I'm using 6 engineers out of the engineering resource pool, by definition, the owner of that resource pool is one of my impact or influence stakeholders. So what I'm establishing is the communication framework to make sure we maintain the linkage between strategy and project delivery. Okay, so that's the second one. The third one is one that people argue with me about this, whether it's really an important one or not, but I'm going to try to convince you it is. But when we look at this, one of the things that we have to understand is that there will be people who aren't on your project, who don't have any vested interest in your project, but oh, by the way, they still are interested in what's going on your project. They're interested, okay? So we call them interested stakeholders. Well, why are they interested? Not working on the project, they don't have any obligation to do anything on the project. Well, because they're interested in the kind of work that you're doing. They may be aware of a project similar to yours coming down the pike for them, and they want to kind of see what went on. They want to be able to identify any problems that you've encountered so that they could avoid those if they get a new project similar to it. So they have an interest in it. Well, I want to keep those people in the loop. I mean, I want to communicate with them. They may be working for me next project, so I want to build a relationship. So let me tell you, I'm going to give you an example. I don't know what the biggest project any of you have worked on, but I'm going to give you an $11 billion, it's B with a big B, $11 billion example of why you don't want to overlook the interested stakeholder. Okay. All right. So this blood glucose monitoring project I'm working on, I get to form the team. I negotiated pretty much carte blanche, finances, individual resources, and so on. So I come into the organization and I start to hand select my team. Now we got to get this done in 18 months. It usually takes 3 years. So I'm being very careful, making sure I get the right people. And so I look at the chemistry group. Now this is a blood glucose chemistry product, so I'm going to need chemists. So I get 25 of the chemists. Now they had 100 chemists in this organization. They had a lot of other things they were doing, but this was the big one. So I get 25, okay? And we get the rest of the team formed up, and it's time to start. And I'm already hearing that I got a problem. I said, what do you mean I got a problem? I said, well, the 75 chemists that you didn't pick, some of them have been with this organization for 10, 15 years, and they're pretty angry that they weren't picked to be on the team. I mean, everybody knew this was the team, and they're pretty angry about it. I said, well, we don't want that. I don't want to leave people upset. We might need them in the future. So I said, let's do this. Let's have a Friday afternoon brown bag session for a few weeks, and we'll get our 25 chemists and their 75 chemists together for a couple hours. No agenda, just have them exchange information. What's working, what's not working, what do you think we ought to be thinking about? And we did that for about 4 weeks. Okay, then we had to get on with the schedule, obviously. We went ahead with that project. We got it done in 18 months. It's written up, by the way, in a magazine as a miracle project. Nobody could believe we could do it. We got it done. And this was a $1 billion company owned by the Engelhorn family in Mannheim, Germany. We got this project done, went back to market, massive success in the marketplace. 3 years after we went live with our project, this company was acquired by Roche Labs for $11 billion. Well, the moral of the story is don't forget the interested stakeholders, because the chemistry that eventually went to the marketplace was actually developed by the non-project chemists. So in other words, had we not included the interested stakeholders, that company may well have been out of business. So it's a real world example. This is not, I don't take this stuff out of books. This is where the rubber meets the road when you're running real projects and making real decisions. So stakeholder study, got to do it. You got to make sure you get that done so that you've got everybody included. The PMBOK says everywhere, it says, got to have a communications plan. Well, this is the heart of the communications plan. So don't leave home without it. Okay, next slide. So in order for you to do your job well, we have all these PMI people, and everybody's made a business out of this. Everybody's found a way to make money on project management, and one of the ways they've done it real effectively is the development of tools that will help you do your job. Okay, I'm okay with help you, but when you start thinking these tools are going to do your job for you, that's when you're going to get in trouble. So we want to look at this, and so I can give you, just from my perspective. Now listen, 54 years in the business, I got some bad stories too, but I don't want to tell you those. But I do want to talk about the idea that there are certain tools that are really going to deliver for you. Okay, so first thing I have to have on every project is a work breakdown structure. Everybody, I mean, this is, I call the WBS. Now remember, don't get hung up on that BS, what that stands for. It stands for breakdown structure. So when you look at this idea of how do we go from the highest level of a project to the lowest level, it's called a work breakdown structure. And it's a hierarchical decomposition of all the work, going to more and more detail until you get down to the bottom where you have what we call work packages. PMI has forever, that I remember at least, said 80 hours of effort is it's a rule of thumb of a good work package. Well, what they meant to say, and they didn't say it very well, was the work packages need to be small enough that when you measure progress, you get enough information soon enough that you can take action to avoid problems. So whether it's 80 hours, 120 hours, I don't care. Just give you that measurable capability. So it becomes the foundation. Now remember, when I say foundation of all things project management, remember, the next thing you got to do is assign resource skill sets to the individual work package. You've defined the scope. Now you got to assign the right people. When you assign the right people, they've got a charge out rate that comes with them. So now you have your cost information. And so you can start to see, I got to load it on. And so now you can ask them, well, how long is it going to take? Now you got your timing information, all housed within the confines of a WBS. It's a beautiful thing. And so you get that information together, you're set for anything now. Once you've done the work to create this WBS, you're ready. So that's tool number one, okay? Tool number two is a critical path schedule. I am completely shocked at what I find when I go into organizations to help them manage their projects more effectively. I ask them, do you have you got a critical path schedule? Oh yeah, we've been doing that. I said, well, could I see it? They said, sure. They come to me and they hand me a stinking bar chart schedule. It's not a critical path schedule. It's a bar chart schedule. Good for the recognition of time against a bar, but it doesn't tell you what the logic flow relationships are. So you've got to have a precedent diagram, critical path schedule. Now PMI has endorsed the precedent diagramming methodology. It's also called CPM. It was developed by DuPont back in the 50s. Been around for a long time to do cost trade-off studies. But what we need it for fundamentally is to be able to identify for any given project where my critical path is. Because that critical path, when that's impacted, you're impacting objective delivery for strategy. When the critical path gets affected, you're affecting the delivery date of a project. So you want to know where that is. And the beauty of it is, if I got 100 work packages, there's only going to be about 20 or 25 of those on the critical path. Everything else is going to have float paths. Now, the float paths tell you how much flexibility you have in moving work around without impacting the delivery date. This is some of the most important information a project manager has. How much freedom do I have to move things based on resource availability, based on encountering problems? How much can I move things on this line without affecting the critical path? And if you don't have that, I mean, I've gone so far as saying, don't take this personally, but if you don't have that, you're probably not really a project manager. You must have taken a boot camp and passed the PMP exam, because this is one of the heart. This is the heart of one of the tools for project manager. A critical path, precedent diagram, logic relationship, schedule, okay? That's the second one. All of these are linked back to the strategy, because anything that happens on the project that impacts the strategy, we got to be talking to people about that. We can't wait till we miss it and then say, oh, shucks, I wish I'd have said something. No, you got to be saying it along the way. So third and final one is your risk management. Because we have a decent plan with a work breakdown structure and a critical path schedule, I am now in a position to do what I call comprehensive risk analysis. And I can look at those activities. I can look at them from the standpoint of probability of occurrence, impact if they do occur, and then I can select the way that we deal with those. But up front, you've got to have a risk register where as you go through your project and analyze the risk, you don't wait till you get there to analyze the risk. You got to analyze it ahead of time. When you get there, you've already dealt with it. You've already formulated an action plan to deal with it, and you go on like you've never missed a beat. Like yeah, that's no problem. We anticipated that, and we were already ready to deal with it. This is another thing that makes you a hero. You want to be a hero. You want to move up the organization. Do risk management well, because what you're going to do is you're going to save a lot of problems for management. You're going to avoid difficult situations that impact strategic objectives, and management appreciates that. Okay, they appreciate it a lot. It's not that complicated. One of the problems is that we've come up with tools that tend to be a little bit more complicated, and so people find reasons not to use them. I ran into that at Microsoft. I was teaching 300 of their finest project managers. I asked them, how many of you use Microsoft projects? And only about 10 hands went up. And I said, if you're not using Microsoft Project to manage your projects when it's the leading software package in the world, what in the world are you using? And they said, oh, well, we use Excel spreadsheets. And I said, you what? I said, why would you do that? Why aren't you using Microsoft Project? And here's what the young lady in the back of the room stood up and she said, Mr. Lambert, she said, the reason I don't use it is just too darn complicated. Well, okay, that's a rationale. But as I said, if it was easy, they wouldn't call it work. And so they got in a little bit of trouble because I happened to communicate to their CIO, a guy named Tony Scott, that they weren't using Microsoft Project. They use it now. I guarantee you, they use it now. And so you got to think about what is it you want to accomplish. Pick the right tool, and then do the work that lets the tool do what it's needed to do for you. All right, next slide. Now, we know that as we've moved along in time. Now, remember, again, when I first started even thinking about doing an IT project, because I never wanted to. I'm a mechanical engineer. These IT geeks, what I don't want to do anything with IT. Well, IT's the future. IT's where all the money is for project management. I got to tell you, tremendous amounts of budget are being allocated for IT projects. Well, those IT projects, guess what? They support strategic objectives. In other words, if I want to increase sales, if I want to increase profitability, if I want to decrease costs, all of those efforts require very sophisticated IT support to enable you to do that job. So what we found with Waterfall, and I saw this a long time ago, is that when you start an IT project, generally speaking, the initial requirements I don't know what's their term that you might use. Well, their initial requirements suck. They're no good. You don't have enough there to really plan the project for the entire life cycle. And so you get into a lot of trouble, a lot of rework, a lot of do-overs. And so along came Agile. Now in 2001, up in the ski resort, Snowbird, up in the hills of Utah, outside of Park City. I'm from Utah, so I know the area well. A group of IT people got together and formulated the Agile Manifesto. And from that point on, everybody's been moving towards the concept of Agile as a way to much more effectively manage IT projects. It's proven itself. It's created a whole new profession. Scrum masters, they're almost as important as project managers. If you're in an Agile environment, they are as important as project managers. And so the waterfall it's still around. It's still around. I do some training for the LDS Church out in Salt Lake City, and I've noticed when I'm out there, they have two camps. They have a waterfall camp with some people in it who, by the way, are old like I am, so old dog, new tricks, you know, they want to stay doing what they do. And then they've got an Agile group, Agile hybrid group, and they're doing the bulk of the IT development projects. Well, they've proven they can deliver faster, better products utilizing this Agile approach. So it's a methodology that's not going away. It's going to be around for a while, and it is gently moving waterfall out. Now, let me point out to you before I go to the next slide. Before I do that, let me point out to you in the new PMBOK, okay, the 7th edition, which comes out January 1. It's supposed to be out July 1, but they had to delay it because of the pandemic, actually. But that particular version is going to go from what we now have in the 6th version, 95% predictive model and 5% Agile, or waterfall, to a 50-50, 50% Agile hybrid and 50% predictive. So the world is changing. I was just counseling a fellow that wanted to get his PMP, and he wanted to know if maybe I should wait till January. I said, no, don't do that. You're crazy if you do that. Get it now before it changes. So those changes are needed. I mean, it's not just arbitrary change, it's needed, but the test is going to be rigorous. Now, a good thing that Chenille has sort of driven is we now take the test at home. I mean, we don't have to leave home to take the test. So this has made it a lot easier, and our objectives of really continuing to develop PMPs will be helped considerably by being able to take it at home. Now, you can't cheat or anything like that, but you can at least be relaxed, take it home, don't have to drive anywhere. And so you look at this and say, well, Agile is really making us, yeah, it is. It is. But think about it. This is a graphic that I just find so perfect for what we talk about. If you think about Agile, it's a descendant of rugby. If you've ever played rugby, rugby is like American football without any pads or protection. These people that play rugby are sick. There's something wrong with them because they're just out there pounding each other. Well, that's kind of where Agile came from, you see, because the way it works is that you take this requirements and you toss it in the middle of what they call a scrum. This is a scrum. Well, out there, you toss the requirements in. Everybody starts pushing, shoving, biting, and kicking. Next thing you know, squirts outside. Somebody runs, picks up, and runs with it. Well, that's pretty much the way Agile works, okay? We have our sprints, we have our daily stand-ups, we look at what we need to do, we get the requirements from the pattern, and off we go. So the theory is we stay current, we do good product development, but we do it on an incremental basis. This was the biggest bitch I ever had about traditional predictive project management, is we wait too long to status where we are against the plan. Well, you can't do that with Agile because every day you're having a stand-up meeting. Every day you're determining where you are, what you did, what you need to do, what's going to get in the way. Beautiful thing. I love it. I love it because it does what we've never been able to do, and that is give us real good, timely feedback on performance. All right, next slide. But because all the stuff I've been telling you is good. I mean, some of you are just going, damn, this is good. I can't wait to get back to work. Yeah, right. And so if you look at this, then what you have to understand is what I'm telling you is good stuff. What I'm telling you will make your career. If you can link your efforts to critical strategic objectives and you can successfully deliver those projects, you're going places. You're going up. I was 37 when I became Vice President of Staff and Organizational Development for the largest contract research in the world. 37 years old, and I didn't have a PhD. So you've got to understand it can happen, but you've got to do what other people need. You've got to do what the strategic objectives say is most important to the organization. So what you've got to do is convince management, because there's no free lunch. There's none of this is free. None of this is you walk in and say, hey, boss, Lee just told me of a good way we can do some things. And they're going to say, oh, well, go ahead, start buying stuff. No, they're not. You've got to convince them of the return on their investment. That's what the whole idea of strategic objective is about. What's the return on my objective? So if you've got a strategic objective that's going to require a PPM, a project portfolio management system, you got to convince somebody that's a wise decision. That stuff's not cheap. So where's my payback? Where's my return on my investment? So you've got a job to do. Will it be worth it? Oh, are you kidding me? You look like a freaking hero. You look like a fortune teller, because you'll be able to see the future before the future gets there. But we've got to be able to be in a position to make that happen, to earn the trust of management that we are going to link with strategic objectives, and we're going to make sure that those get done. All right, last slide, Matez. So here's the thing. I just posted this on LinkedIn today on another topic, but I love this slide because I know some people. I know some people who really thought they were smart, who really thought they were, top drawer stuff, and so I always think of them when I use this graphic, because they just didn't get it. There were two people specific. I won't name names because they might be listening. The two people specifically who thought they were so good. They were knocking out projects faster than you could shake a stick. And at the end of the day, they both got fired. And they went away, and they came to me and they said, what the heck's going on? I delivered 3 projects in the last 9 months. I delivered 4 projects in the last 9 months. So what I had to tell them was bad news. I said, it's bad news, guys. You delivered the wrong projects. Those projects didn't add value to the organization. So fundamentally, they were a waste of resources. So they paid the price. Don't be a PM who doesn't get it. Be a PM who links your work to the important stuff, the strategic objectives. And I will tell you right now, if you ask a question and nobody can tell you what strategic objective your project supports, you got a problem. You're going to have a hard time getting resources. You're going to have a hard time having an impact on the project work that needs to be done. So think about it. Think about what I've said. Think about making that linkage. And I think it'll open some doors that you may not have anticipated would be open to you. Okay, Matthias, that's all I got formally. I hope we have a few questions, because I have answers, so I need questions.
Thank you very much, Lee. It was very, very insightful. For people who are like me, who are on the field with different projects in hand, is like very, very meaningful. Everything you've said is like a daily matter, starting from focus, from the C-level, how to ask focus, how to comply with like okay, we have these resources, we have these strategic objectives, and we really need to decide whether this or this activity, because everything doesn't fit. That is a big struggle in an everyday activity in different enterprises. Yes, I think you got to the one of the most important things. But okay, thank you very much, Lee. It was very, very insightful. As I said, we have a couple of questions. So let me tell you first question. That it says, is that linkage from...
Ahora tengo que prestar atención, porque viene el código. ¿Ah?
Sorry.
Así que ahora sí, no me hables por 10 minutos.
I have someone, sorry, there's someone who's talking. Please. Okay, I'm going to ask first question to Mr. Lee. Okay, sorry. Let me see who's with the mic open. Give me a second, Lee, please.
No, me hacen.
¿Hay alguien con el micrófono abierto? Agradezco si lo puede mutear. Hola. Ok, yo no veo quién es. Okay, Lee, first questions. Is that linkage between strategy and project delivery we're talking here different from what business case is supposed to be?
No, I think most people now are treating this, the business case concept has really gotten strengthened. It's been around for a long time, but what we found before as we approved projects, we didn't have a strong business case to support the project. So making a strategic linkage became very difficult. So I think they're connected. They're almost one and the same. If we have a business case, then it's pretty easy to identify what the strategic linkage is.
Great. There's another question here. Do you have any recommendation for weak with, commas, or young project managers who are just starting in the organization or aren't in a power position?
Yeah, there's two things here, because I counsel young people who are trying to think whether they want to be a project manager or not. So the first thing they need to do is do some studying, do some reading and some evaluation of what the process of project management looks like. And then what they would do, at least if they work for me, I would create some small projects where they had a chance to actually put to work some of the concepts to see if they could validate that they understand it. I don't see any other way. It has to be hands-on. I think, theory is a great thing. I love to talk about. I can talk about theory till you guys are asleep, but it doesn't do any good. So I would do that. I'd have them read some stuff to get enough information that they're kind of what I call dangerous. And then I would create some kind of a little project or a piece of a project to validate that they're going to be able to handle it.
Great. So there's another question here. How can we measure the value we add to our workers when we work in an organization with projects beyond economic value?
Well, I'm a people person. So when I look at this and I talk about measuring value for people, for the workers, the key here is clarity of objectives, feedback on performance, do gap analysis, and provide development opportunities. That's adding value to the workers, but as a residual, the organization benefits from that as well. But that's not as quantifiable as an economic value.
Yeah, interesting. There's a saying that says, don't value what you measure, but measure what you value. And it is a very tough thing.
Correct.
When it is
correct.
not monetizable. So I would add a question on my own, a last one, if you will.
Wait, before you ask, let me add to that last one. One of the measures of value add when we get in a situation like that is the attrition or turnover rate. When that turnover rate drops, you're adding value to the relationship with the workers.
Yes, turnover rate is the concept. Yep. Great. So I wanted to ask a question on my own in order to close this part.
Sure.
That relates to agile world and bridging the gap you have posed as the problem to analyze. How do you think the agile world is addressing this gap between strategic design of strategic objects and project delivery?
Well, I think they're having problems with it, to be honest with you. It's difficult to do because on one hand, strategy tends to be longer term, okay? Agile project management tends to be shorter term. So the disconnect is easily runs into problems there. So what the strategic people need to do is focus their attention on identifying shorter term strategic outputs or strategic objectives, because that's the whole idea behind Agile, is to get evolutionary output over time. And if I'm not going to measure anything till 6 months down the road, then I've just wasted a lot of Agile effort. So I think the onus really falls on the strategic objective creators to do a better job of shortening the time frame between when a strategic objective is accomplished and not.
Great, thank you, Lee. So now, if you want, we can move on. We have already